Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a genuinely fascinating literary puzzle. We're looking at a poem called The Trees by Adrian Rich. Now, on the surface, this reads like a beautiful, maybe kinda strange story, but as we'll uncover today, it's actually this masterful exploration of deep truths about human nature, confinement, and our undeniable drive for freedom. I'm honestly so excited to guide you through this because the way Rich uses imagery to paint these massive, sweeping ideas is literally nothing short of brilliant.
Just imagine this for a second, okay? You're sitting in your living room, just going about your normal evening, and suddenly your houseplants, your decorative indoor trees, decide they've absolutely had enough. They just up and leave. It's a surreal, almost magical realist premise, right? But this wild, basically impossible scenario is exactly how Adrian Rich hooks us. Before we even touch the literary analysis or symbolism, we just have to appreciate the sheer bizarre thrill of this literal story.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap. We'll start with a surreal midnight escape, move to the anatomy of escape, then decode the symbolism. After that, we'll hit the core themes of liberation and wrap it all up with the ultimate takeaway. Right, part 1. A surreal midnight escape. The trees leave.
So the poem kicks off by dropping us into a really strange central conflict. The poet tells us that the forest outside has been empty for a long time. And why? Well, because the trees have been confined indoors. I mean, think about how totally unnatural that is. The vast, wild outside world is left completely barren, while these massive forces of nature are trapped inside the walls of a house. It's this immediate, jarring disruption of the natural order, and it perfectly sets the stage for the rebellion that's about to kick off. As the trees finally begin to leave the house, that empty forest starts filling up again.
Moving on to part 2, the anatomy of escape, physical struggle.
Let's see how this actually builds. Rich uses incredibly active, almost kinetic language to describe this breakout. It's not some poof of smoke, instantaneous magic. It is hard, physical work. First, the roots are working tirelessly beneath the floorboards, really struggling to detach themselves from the foundation of the house. Then, the leaves are moving eagerly, straining toward the open air. And finally, the branches are stretching toward the glass windows, pushing as if they're trying to literally break free. This highly sensory language highlights the sheer determination, that undeniable desire of these living things to get back to their natural habitat.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the specific comparison Rich uses. She compares the moving branches to patients moving toward the doors of a hospital. This is absolutely brilliant because it illustrates the state of the trees by grounding this totally surreal image in a very recognizable human emotion. By comparing them to patients, Rich is basically telling us that being kept indoors was actually a sickness. The trees were in this unnatural, unhealthy state of confinement, right? And moving outside is their recovery. Living beings simply cannot thrive when they're entirely cut off from their natural environment.
Meanwhile, you gotta wonder, what's happening inside the house? The poet is just sitting quietly, writing letters. But she's hyper-aware of the activity happening right outside her door. She hears the sounds of the trees moving. She can practically feel their immense determination. The vibe inside the house is quiet, sure, but it is supercharged with this unstoppable energy of change. The poet is playing the role of a witness here, and you really get the sense that she genuinely admires the courage and persistence of these trees as they do the heavy lifting of breaking out.
And here's the triumphant climax of our literal narrative. As night falls, the trees actually do it. They successfully escape the house. They continue their journey out into the wild, and the moonlight shines through their branches. That forest, which was so sad and empty at the beginning of the poem, it now appears full of movement and life once again. The trees have finally reclaimed their rightful place.
Which brings us to part 3, decoding the symbolism, finding the meaning.
Okay, let's look at the two main settings of the poem. On one hand, the house feels incredibly claustrophobic. It represents restrictions, confinement, and these artificial conditions that just stifle life. But in total contrast, the forest is expansive. It represents ultimate freedom, natural growth, and a genuinely fulfilling life. The entire poem hinges on this necessary journey from artificial limits to true, expansive freedom.
So, the crucial translation here is actually pretty simple. If the house is artificial restriction and the forest is natural freedom, who are the trees? Well, the trees are us. The trees symbolize people seeking freedom and self-realization. And once you see this direct translation, the whole poem just opens up entirely. This isn't just a quirky story about magical houseplants anymore. It's a profound metaphor for human beings struggling to break out of the unnatural confines that society, or honestly, maybe even we ourselves, have built around us.
All right, Part 4. Core Themes of Liberation. The Central Ideas.
The source text outlines 4 major themes working together here. First, freedom and liberation, that deep internal struggle to escape confinement and reach a place where natural growth is actually possible. Second, a return to nature, the idea that every living thing, humans included of course, is happiest when in its natural environment. Third, self-expression and growth. The kinetic movement of the trees perfectly represents our own human need to express ourselves freely and develop our true potential. And finally, the human relationship with nature. The poem serves as this stark reminder that nature has its own formidable strength. It cannot and really should not be completely controlled or restricted by humans. It's always going to reclaim its space eventually.
If we had to boil it all down to just one central idea, it's this definition of freedom. Adrienne Rich is showing us that freedom isn't just some luxury. It is a basic, fundamental need of all living beings. Just like those trees breaking their roots through the floorboards and smashing their branches against the glass, we as people have this innate, powerful drive to seek independence. We need a life that allows us to grow naturally and authentically without any artificial ceilings holding us down.
And finally, Part 5. The ultimate takeaway. The exam conclusion. This right here is the big, undeniable truth of the source text. The desire for freedom is simply stronger than any restriction. Period. Through this incredibly powerful imagery and symbolism, the poem teaches us that neither nature nor human beings can remain confined forever. You know, you can build a house, you can lock the doors, but eventually, the roots are going to tear up the floorboards. That innate drive for liberation is always going to win out in the end.
I want to leave you with a final thought today. Think about the metaphors we've unpacked. What are the houses in your own life? What are the artificial conditions, those unnatural limits that are currently keeping your branches from stretching out? And more importantly, taking a page right out of Adrienne Rich's book, what steps will you take to detach those roots, break the glass, and finally step out into your own forest? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep seeking your freedom.